Hello and welcome on the Barricades. My name is Boyan Stanislavski and I will be your host today. Dr. Maria Cherna, the usual co-host of the show, wasn't able to make it. Nonetheless, I have two great guests for you, frequent guests on our show, Bozhin Traykov and Arto Artinian. Welcome to the show, guys. Welcome again, and thanks for coming on again.
Thank you.
All right, so let's talk about Bulgaria, and let's talk about the American imperialist rampage in Bulgaria and how it's unfolding, how it keeps unfolding despite protests, quite massive protests, by the way, but we're going to mention that at the end of the program so that we leave at least one optimistic element, for once, to end the program on a kind of optimistic note. Bozhin, I want to go to you first. Let's talk about the government and the current Bulgarian government, a government which is quite unique in a sense that it doesn't represent anyone, with the exception of a few people, literally a handful of like oligarchs or clique, which is linked to the American state. By the way, I saw a program where one Bulgarian politician made a list of 14 out of 20 ministers in the current cabinet, in the current government of Bulgaria, who are linked directly to the American state, which is really quite exceptional. I mean, this kind of level of subjugation. I mean, I can't quite think of any other precedent like that in modern Bulgarian history. But anyway, we told you on this program that things are going to go really, really bad once this government is allowed to be formed, and things are going just as we predicted. Nothing to be proud of, I guess. But anyway, let's keep our audience informed. Bozhin, to you now.
Okay, so first of all, let's start with. Let's focus on the Ministry of Defense, or so-called Ministry of Defense, because it starts to more and more resemble Ministry of War. It's a pro-war kind of ministry in the poorest European Union country. So what was announced there? And first of all, just to kind of mention, to kind of add to what you were saying about the 14, that the people linked to the American state. Well, in this case, Mr. Tagarev, who is the Minister of Defense, is directly linked to the Ukrainian state because he has been serving as an expert, in some capacity, expert in the Ministry of Defense in Ukraine for 3 years. That's the official information that we have. We don't know if this is still continuing, and what is his relationship with the Ukrainian government right now. All we know is that he's a very kind of hawkish, pro-Ukrainian. His stance on the conflict in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, is that we should do everything to support Ukraine. Currently, it was announced that the signals that are coming from the Ministry of Defense are not surprising at all. We were discussing the fact that this is kind of a very clear example of government that is really serving U.S. imperial interests 100%. I would call it pro-American on steroids, because what is happening right now is, despite public opinion, despite the will of the majority of the people here, the Minister of Defense announced this directly kind of line of support right now with weaponry. Well, that's kind of one of the main decisions that was made, is that Bulgaria will be part of this European Union direction to provide 1 million missiles for Ukraine, and that Bulgaria will be included in this kind of I guess coalition of the willing or whatnot, that is going to participate in this. What also was announced, that Bulgaria will actually now going to provide 2% of its GDP for purposes of military expenditure, to kind of like follow the requirement, the NATO requirement, which is absolutely incredible, because so far the country is experiencing these social catastrophic results of kind of not of relegating money from the budget of education and healthcare to military expenditure, and this is now going to be even further. and there have been a lot of statistics about what is the result of this kind of militarization of Bulgaria, the poorest European Union member. I want to emphasize that. And so this is what is going on right now. In the meantime, the president of Bulgaria, Mr. Radev, General Radev, said that this is not a good idea, that he is opposing this decision, Bulgaria being part of this initiative to provide missiles for Ukraine. We don't actually have these missiles, but the Bulgarian Ministry of Defense announced its kind of desire to sort of develop certain kind of infrastructure to provide these missiles, which you can imagine the budget expenditure on the military and what this is going to cost the Bulgarians in general, with lack of any kind of social safety nets, and with one of them, one of the countries with the least amount of sort of social programs in the neoliberal European Union. So you can imagine.
Yeah, this is just going to deepen what you're talking about, and I guess like what you're trying to say is that this is only going to deepen the civilizational downgrade that we've been in for the last, over 20 years. Arto, I want to go to you now, because this is really, really ludicrous on its face. Bulgaria is going to participate in the mission, in the great European mission of collecting 1 million pieces of munition for Ukraine. Now, first of all, I want to say that I thought this initiative was already over. I thought they gave up, because they were traveling here and there. I'm sure you remember that it was like a month or 2 months ago, maybe a little longer than that, when they were traveling and announcing it and publicizing it, that now we're traveling, from country to country, from one Ministry of Defense to other Ministry of Defense to collect 1 million munitions, and they failed. They were not able to collect it. But now Bulgaria, Bulgaria of all places, well, maybe Moldova and Fiji should join, and then we'll see, how far we can get with collecting 1 million munitions. So that's number one. I want you to comment on that, in terms of where does the European leadership stand? Where do they stand mentally? Because I don't think politically there's anything to comment here. But then there's also the question of, again, we warned everyone that this government is only going to be formed in order to put Bulgaria into the meat grinder of history, which is called the front of the Ukrainian war. And once this happens, if it really escalates to the point where Bulgaria becomes an active part supporting Ukraine, that really threatens the very existence of the Bulgarian statehood. Your take, Arto?
Yeah, Boyan, I think on the mental state of the European Union politicians, I think they're somewhere in 1939 or 1941. Except that thankfully for us and everybody else, they don't have the political and personal qualities of the leaders of the Third Reich to be even more successful.
And they don't have the munition.
And they don't have the munitions of the Third Reich. But if you remember, first of all, there are very big questions about the historiography of the European Union and its rootedness in Nazi post-World War legal scholarship and business management school scholarships. That's aside. The second point is, the last time major European politicians used the phrase United Europe to discuss a war that is being waged in Europe was in Hitler's administration. Because to the rest of the world, the German Nazi-dominated invasion of the Soviet Union, for example, but also the occupation of Europe, was portrayed as united Europe against the barbarian Russians, who were then communists, Bolsheviks, etc. So I think this is, in some subliminal, maybe subconscious level, this is an attempt by some of the leading elites in Europe, the European Union, perhaps Western Europe and elsewhere, to gain revenge for their shameful and total defeat in World War II at the hands of the Soviet Union and its allies. So I think that's what's going on in the mental heads of the policymakers in the European Union. They're trying to basically dismantle the Russian Federation as a way of essentially rolling back their previously unsuccessful attempt for all the reasons that we have discussed.
Many times.
Many times. Now, the second thing about munitions, it's comical that you're waging a major war using another state, Ukraine, which is super shameful to begin with, without having necessary weapons to do it. So you have this ridiculous situation where artillery shells are being imported into Ukraine from South Korea, From Japan
outside NATO. Outside NATO. Notice this.
Outside of NATO.
They've ran out of munitions, so they now have to reach Israel. They have to go to South Korea, to Japan.
Yeah.
Like, this is ridiculous.
And so in the first it shows deep unprofessionalism, which is very troubling because you're talking about states that have nuclear weapons.
Yes.
And if the people on top are so unprofessional and pathetic, that's very dangerous, because that means they may not fully understand the implications of a possible nuclear war, which is very bad. And that's what I think worries me the most. But I think as far as Bulgaria is concerned, Bulgaria has a huge munitions factory left over by the socialist government. The socialist government of Bulgaria, with the direct aid of the Soviet Union, built a huge munitions plants in Karlovo and Sopot, which provided munitions for the Bulgarian army.
That's
now,
right.
since 1991, they haven't really worked at full capacity.
Well, they actually seems to have worked. They seem to have worked at one point during the Syrian civil war, and that was delivered. Yeah, that was news delivered by the Bulgarian journalist Dilyana Gaitangieva, who said, who explained how our factories were working 3 shifts basically in order to supply munitions for the head chopping, the kind of.
You're right, Boyan. And so I think if need be, Bulgarian munitions they're state-owned, the biggest ones, state-owned munitions factories can be working in 3 shifts, 24 hours to produce. And here's the important point: Bulgarian munitions factories produce Soviet type munitions. So which may or may not be helpful in the Ukraine, because most of their Soviet era equipment has been destroyed already. So they're shifting to NATO equipment. True. So I don't know how much weapons the Bulgarian factories can produce for the NATO calibers, in artillery, but certainly they can produce ammunitions for rifles, like small weapons, etc. So I think that's definitely what they're counting on to use the Bulgarian. But the problem is every state has to first produce enough munitions for the defense of its own sovereign territory. So
that's history now. I'm afraid that this is like there's a paradigm shift now. Now we have to produce only for Ukraine,
and this is what Bulgarian generals like Shivikov, who's the only general in the Bulgarian army who has combat experience after 1989, has repeatedly said that if you strip Bulgaria's supplies of weaponry, you're leaving the Bulgarian army and the Bulgarian state defenseless. That's a crime. That's
we're
talking crime against.
Of course, sorry to interrupt you, but we're talking, the same general actually mentioned twice, if we move even an inch, like in terms of like if we even give like 100 pieces of munition for regular pistols that our army uses anywhere away, we will be defenseless at 2 major spots. One is Kozloduy, which is the nuclear power plant, and second is Sofia, which is the only viable urban center really in Bulgaria, economically speaking, at least. Today. So we're really on the verge. That's why I mentioned that the question of statehood is really at stake here.
But I think if you take a model of the United Europe of 1941, then it makes sense, because in the United Europe of 1941 that's unified against barbarians from the East, makes sense to apply to today. The language is different, the flags are different, at least outside of Ukraine, because in Ukraine there are a lot of flags with the Nazi symbol. But in 1941, a lot of states supplied the German Nazi-led war effort, at the expense of their own sovereignty. So I see very troubling parallels between these 2 periods. Of course, today they're executed much more unprofessionally, thankfully. You didn't see the German war ministry send newspaper announcements. We need more, shells for our army. Give us more shells, Philippines or, Argentina.
Yeah, exactly. And they had, their minister of foreign affairs was still better back then than what we have now with Annalena Baerbock. Like, I don't even want to go there. Like, I mean, this is going to be the worst foreign minister in the history of Germany ever.
Well, Boyan, that
finish your thought, and I want to go to Bozhin. Please go ahead.
The Chinese Premier Xi, in one of his meetings with Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada, said exactly that, because Trudeau had leaked the private contents, diplomatic contents of their conversation to the press. So Xi said in English, he said, look, if you really want to be taken seriously by me and by our government, you really need to learn how to behave like a prime minister, indicating that the level of unprofessionalism and stupidity was so high that they couldn't even talk to these people.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, Bozhin, let's go back to you, and let's talk about the next the next kind of important occurrence that we want to discuss here. Well, go ahead and explain what it's all about. It has to do with journalism. Let me just float that.
Yeah, okay. First of all, the media climate in Bulgaria right now, I mean mainstream media and national media, the Bulgarian national television and the Bulgarian national radio, is extremely one-sided, as it can be imagined. It's very one-dimensional. It's it's only providing the so-called right point of view, the official point of view, the pro-war, pro-Ukrainian, pro-war point of view, and the ideological climate is also in a similar. I mean, in terms of the political talk, all the political establishment, all of the major cultural institutions, all of the major educational institutions are only provided one-sided point of view, also about Bulgarian history.
Let me interrupt you here, because I think it's very important for our viewers to consume that this is contrary to the sentiments and to the recognition of the situation by the Bulgarian public. I mean, the Bulgarian public is, keeping fingers crossed for Russia. Let's just put it that way, okay, so that we don't have to dig into the whole thing. But within this conflict, there is very, very little, absolutely, as I said in the beginning of the program, a handful of people supports Ukraine in Bulgaria, all right? And yet, the entire establishment, the media syndicate, the politicians, the cultural institutions, is that everybody in the high society is actually in opposition to the whole of the Bulgarian public, to the whole of the Bulgarian society, basically. So this is the state of democracy that we experienced 30 years into the transition. Go ahead.
Well, I think, Boyan, this is in accordance with the United States recognition that its attempt for ideological hegemony here is failing. That is why we had the so-called expert on disinformation visiting here from the United States, who was supposed to provide the proper information that is not Russian propaganda and so on. So basically, what is happening right now in this context is there is only one current voice of, let's say, providing an alternative point of view, or let's just call it voice of resistance to all these establishment narratives. And this is the journalist Petar Volghin from the Bulgarian National Radio. And he only has a chance to do that once in a week for about hour and a half, because there's also musical parts in his program. So for an hour and a half, he had this chance. The Bulgarian public was provided. The Bulgarian public, that majority is actually not agreeing with the official discourse, was provided this opportunity to have one person providing the alternative point of view on Bulgarian National Radio, which is paid with, of course, which is funded by taxpayers' money. So it's supposed to be national radio, of course. And now what we're seeing is, as soon as the current government got in power, various attempts from so-called civil society groups or politicians to there is an attack on Volghin, and there has been a constant attack to remove him from Bulgarian National Radio for quite some time. But these attacks have kind of increased in its current climate. And one of the attacks came from a political figure, a politician, a deputy who is part of the current ruling government, continuing the change. He is actually a notorious kind of figure that has been kind of a clownish figure, actually, who is behaving like really unprofessionally in the Bulgarian parliament, very arrogant person, and he's also known to have his mother actually has a publishing house, which is kind of these alternative publishing houses but for the most part related to the tastes of these small percentage of Bulgarian society, so-called, bourgeois, sort of like the Yellowstone people or whatever they.
Yeah, well, what Bozhin means, just to clarify, is that there's a handful of people who are mostly Western educated people who have very little connection really with Bulgaria and with the Bulgarian culture, with the Bulgarian kind of way of life, with the Bulgarianness, so to say, like however general you'd like to sort of whatever kind of general meaning you'd like to put into this term. So those people, they really dream of Bulgaria becoming like the West. They dream that Bulgaria should become what they like to refer to a normal state with normal parties, normal thing, normal capitalist, advanced capitalist state as we see in Western Europe. This is of course utopian on so many, it's stupid on so many levels, but I just want to point out here or stress on the fact that I personally respect Petar Volghin, the editor, the journalist in question here, a lot. He's been a voice of dissent for many, many years now. He's also a highly respected journalist, okay? I mean, he's not just, another guy with an opinion, okay? He's someone who really does have a position in the Bulgarian establishment. I'm talking about the journalistic environment, okay, journalistic circles, and to attack him is not just an attack on someone who just has a dissenting voice, but is also an attack on a kind of the symbol of, as you said, Bozhin, yourself, resistance, and a symbol of someone who actually represents the Bulgarian public somewhere with his one, voice. But Bozhin, before I go back to you, I want to hear Arto's take on this. What do you think, especially vis-a-vis, the kind of American experience, right? Because, when you come to think about people like Tucker Carlson, for example, I've had my disagreements with Petar Volghin in the past. I don't agree, obviously, on many points, most of the points with Tucker Carlson. Nonetheless, they seem to have this kind of thing which really irritates and annoys the establishment, right? Which is that they can explain to millions of people, thanks to the platforms that where they work, they are able to explain to millions of people the truth about the war in Ukraine and about the international politics. Your take, Arto?
Well, I mean, Boyan, it's clear that, as Bozhin said, this is an attempt to establish complete control over the media narrative that is heard by most people in the country. And if you have one prominent voice in the most popular radio station, which is Bulgarian, national radio, then if you remove that voice, then it becomes much more difficult for the average person to get a systematic oppositional view, because they have to go to Volgin's Facebook page. They have to, it just becomes more difficult. So I think it's interesting here. I think when the pro-Western fundamentalists, as I call them, were not in power, they thrived they repeated the importance of non-governmental organizations, because they said the state can always censor us and there's not ideal conditions of freedom of press in Bulgaria. So the non-government organizations are the real bearers of democracy and freedom. Now they are the government. And what is the first thing that they do? They attempt to censor one of the most famous and publicly known journalists on government radio. And they're doing it as the ones in power. So in their own language of kind of Western liberalism, this is an example of, in their language, authoritarian suppression of the freedom of speech. There's no other way to think about it.
And let's just add here one important thing, that the Bulgarian National Radio is one of the very few media that still have, relatively good ratings. I mean, people still trust the Bulgarian National Radio, okay? So this is also an attempt to destroy the last remaining media outlet that actually makes sense to people to go there.
And I think, Boyan, in this case, if this kind of authoritarian, anti-democratic suppression of freedom of speech continues, the only alternative for a truly democratic grassroots press would be distributed, independent platforms like Barricades and etc. Because they're not funded by government entities which can be stopped, or they're not funded by state security agencies like the grants, which can be
Yeah,
cut.
exactly.
Yeah.
We're not funded like Barricada or the Barricade, like the English language version that you're watching right now, is also is not funded at all by any kind of entities, be it civil society organizations or worse, the kind of government organization. Okay, guys, we've got like 5 minutes until the end of the program. So Bozhin, I want to go to you again, and let's talk about something optimistic. Let's talk about the march for freedom and sorry, what was it, for peace and prosperity?
Neutrality.
No. Neutrality, yes.
Peace and neutrality, or sovereignty. Yes. Peace and sovereignty, yes.
Exactly. Okay, so those are, this is an initiative, this is an ongoing initiative. Those are marches which occur on a cyclical basis in Bulgaria, in many cities, towns, urban centers, and that's something that gets totally unreported in the mainstream media, in the West, like even in Bulgaria, I suppose. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like, let's talk about the last instance of this success, okay? And let's talk a little bit about the initiative itself and the history of it. Go ahead.
Okay, so basically, as far as I know, the initiative itself is organized by about 20 different kinds of civil society organizations, but not the type of like NGOs and civil society organizations that we
Real
know
civil society
as networks of forming public opinion funded by American or European Union money, but the kind of the opposite side of the spectrum. I don't. I see many kind of very well-renowned figures there, like sports figures, like intellectuals, like professors, and so on. Also, some other people who but for the most part, the initiative is really coming out of sort of like non-political organizations that are not really supported by any political party, including the one that we've talked about before, Возрождение, which is supposed to be in opposition to what is going on right now in terms of the establishment. But what is really optimistic is that the march this time in Sofia, maybe about at least 10,000 people participated.
Which is a lot by Bulgarian standards, really a lot by Bulgarian standards, okay? I mean, everything beyond 5,000 people in Bulgaria is like massive.
And it is the seventh march that has been organized so far. Unfortunately, here in Varna, where I am, it wasn't as there weren't as many people as the previous marches. I don't know why, maybe because of the rain before that or whatnot. But it was about half of, or maybe many of the people have actually gone to Sofia, which is also what I heard, that a lot of people decided to focus on Sofia. But for the most part, it is quite impressive that the march took place in 45 different states, 38 inside Bulgaria, and the rest outside, including Canada, United Kingdom. So yes, it's very interesting that the march is getting momentum.
But you're talking about Bulgarians marching in
yes,
those
Bulgarians
other
marching in other countries. Yes, for the support of peace and neutrality of Bulgaria in this conflict. Yes, and sovereignty of the country as well. I think we need to point out to the fact that the tactic in terms of the tactics of the organizers in Sofia, as far as I am concerned, in Sofia, it is very good that they are not allowing any kind of politicization, and the march is under the banner of uniting all Bulgarians who are against this, involving Bulgaria in this war. Now, I cannot say the same thing here in Varna. Unfortunately, the organizers in Varna are not that clever. Apparently, they have no idea about strategizing and tactics for political organizing. I don't think they're at all educated and aware of such communist, great political strategies like Gramsci or Georgy Dimitrov. So, unfortunately, they have created some divisions here, and I know for certainty that some people have decided not to participate because of this kind of like including other issues and not focusing on the question of the war and that the war is the most pressing issue right now. So I think they should benefit from reading a little bit of Dimitrov and a little bit of the tactics of the United Front.
Let's just add for our Western audience that Georgy Dimitrov is was the first leader of socialist Bulgaria in the 40s. Okay, Arto, the last 90 seconds of the program, they go to you. So you have the opportunity to kind of utter some closing remarks.
I think in conclusion, I think the widening scope and numbers of the protests against the war and in defense of Bulgarian sovereignty, national sovereignty, are the best way, I think, today to fight and to prevent the sliding of Bulgaria into this
probably the only
way. So massive, peaceful protests which show to the ruling elites that have usurped power that the majority of the Bulgarian people are against those policies. I think that's the best way to stop such suicidal and horrible politics from actually being successful.
Right, and let's hope that we're really not gonna, end the Bulgarian statehood by all, through the actions of this insane actions of this government, and they only just begun. This is the most dangerous part of the whole thing. Okay, thank you very much, Arto. Thank you very much, Bozhin, for taking time to participate in our program, and thank you for your comments and insights. To our viewers and listeners, thank you very much for being with us. And if you find our work valuable, don't forget that you can support us by going to our Patreon profile and or by purchasing, for example, a paid subscription via Substack. We're also available there. Thank you very much, and see you in the next segments.